Massachusetts, where the sports culture is intense, the summers are incredible, the seafood's world famous, and the schools and universities are top notch. What's not to love about the Bay State? From the Salem witch trials to the Boston Tea Party, Massachusetts has one of the most interesting and storied pasts of any state. But today, we're going to talk about some of the pits of this state. That's right, the places you don't want to live. We took into account all sorts of data, crime and poverty and the quality of schools and home prices. And while the data says a certain thing, I also took into account your opinion. That's right, you Bay Staters have been pretty vocal about the places in your state that you think are good and bad. So while Massachusetts might seem pretty Ivy League, you definitely don't want to pahk your caw in the places we're going to talk about. Let's get started, shall we? We begin our tour of the worst places to live in Massachusetts with the stop in FITCHBURG, located in a more rural part of the state, kind of just south of the New Hampshire border. The city's home to just over 40,000 people. And we've heard that FITCHBURG used to be a great place to live, with mom and pop shops lining Main Street and beautiful Victorian mansions and great schools. And while all that sounds wonderful, it sure has changed a lot in the last decade. Nowadays, Main Street's run down. There's homeless people setting up camp and drug deals everywhere, and Victorian mansions are falling apart, and they're being rented as low-income housing. And some of the schools have had recent complaints about being unsanitary, which is terrible. You could blame a lot of the problems on FITCHBURG's struggling economy. The unemployment rate here is the third worst in the state at 8.3%. And at the same time, the cost of living is 10% above the U.S. norm. That's not a good combination. Now, after passing through, there's some things to do around FITCHBURG. Like you can visit the city's art museum, or you can take the kids to the Great Wolf Lodge for the weekend, but when you're done sliding on water slides, you should probably leave. Now we're going to move to the far northwest part of the state for number 9 on our list, North Adams. I'm sure lots of people in Massachusetts are like, yeah, there's 13,000 people here. Driving through North Adams, you might think it might be a nice place to live. It seems artsy and adorable. It's home to the biggest contemporary art museum in the country, and it's surrounded by mountains. But don't let the looks fool you. North Adams' economy is struggling. Households make about $41K a year, and they have the worst home values in the state. The poverty rate is nearly 20%. What is going on with North Adams? The schools here aren't great, and it shows. 16% of adults here never graduated high school. And crime's also an issue. The crime rate here is 49% higher than the national rate and 144% higher than the state's total crime rate. A lot of it's property crime, but there's violent crime here too, all the time. And if that wasn't enough, the city's also struggling with malfunctioning fire hydrants. That's right, when a house catches fire, the fire department arrives and they try to find the nearest fire hydrant. It doesn't work. And the city's response, try another one. Maybe you should try another city. At number 8 on our list of the worst places to live in Massachusetts is Lawrence, located in the northeastern part of the state, also up near the New Hampshire border. Lawrence used to be a booming manufacturing city, but those days are long gone now, pal, leaving the city with a weak job market and the worst unemployment rate in the state, 10%. More than a fifth of this town's residents lives below the poverty line, and it's an expensive area to live in too. The median home value in the region is about $271,000, which is a hard mortgage to cover on a salary of just $44,000. It's not surprising why the city has a large homeless population, is it? And Lawrence is struggling more than just economically. They have a huge drug problem here. It seems that Lawrence is the epicenter for all the heroin and the fentanyl trade for all of New England. A bunch of highways intersect in Lawrence, and the cops here say that a lot of the drug deals are occurring at fast food restaurants just right off the exit. People who live here say they find needles along the streets and in the parks too. It's all very, very sad. At number 7, Holyoke. Located about 8 miles north of Springfield, the city is home to just over 40,000 people, and it's home to the Volleyball Hall of Fame. It's worth a visit if you like volleyball, but you'll want to pass on staying here. Holyoke has a bunch of problems, with poverty ranking them on the top. During the 19th century, the city produced about 80% of the writing paper used in the U.S., but these days, folks here are struggling to find a way to make any kind of living. About 30% of the city's residents live below the poverty line, and that's tough when you consider the area's high cost of living. I think we're starting to see a pattern here. A lot of people are broke, and it's really expensive to live here. 6% of the people here don't have a job, and even the minimum wage jobs are hard to find. Some people say the fast food restaurants aren't even hiring. Another reason to steer clear of Holyoke: this place is dangerous. The city has a crime rate that's like 80% above the U.S. standard, and the FBI called Holyoke the third most dangerous city in Massachusetts. If you lived here for a year, you'd have a 1 in 117 chance of being the victim of a violent crime and a 1 in 27 chance of being the victim of a property crime. You better watch your back here. People who live here also complain about drug addicts on the streets. There's no nightlife, and they say the restaurants suck. But Holyoke is home to the second largest St. Patrick's Day parade in the U.S., so one day a year, folks can throw back some Guinness and forget about how unlucky they are to live in Holyoke. Number 6 on our list of the worst places to live in Massachusetts is Chelsea, which sits along the Mystic River, kind of facing Boston from across the water. Chelsea's home to nearly 40,000 people. Unlike other cities on this list, Chelsea doesn't really have the worst unemployment rate or the lowest home values, but the cost of living is high here. Expenses run about 30% above the national average, which is tough when homes are $350,000 and the median income is only $56,000. Now, we heard from a bunch of people who say that the only good thing about this place is its location. You're convenient to the city, you're by the airport and the subways, but you kind of give up quality of life for convenience. People complain about the city being too crowded, the roads and sidewalks are falling apart, there's trash everywhere, and there's shady characters on every corner. What's going on in Chelsea? Education is also an issue here. 60% of kids in Chelsea are economically disadvantaged, and over 40% are English language learners. And all the kids don't really have reliable internet at home, which has made remote learning kind of near impossible here. And get this, 31% of adults living in Chelsea never graduated high school. What is happening here? At number 5, another Boston suburb, LYNN. LYNN's just about a 20-minute train ride from the city, and it's home to about 94,000 people. Being a coastal town, LYNN has great parks, has some great beaches, some historic architecture, and a growing art scene, but it has a historic reputation for crime. In fact, there's a saying, "Lynn, Lynn, the city of sin, you never come out the way you went in." A lot of the crime here is catered around gang activity. There's a lot of youth violence, and it's not just happening on the streets, it's happening on the playgrounds too. Just the other day, a 17-year-old boy was recently killed in one of the city's playgrounds, and sadly, it's not even that unusual. People living here say there's gang graffiti everywhere, there's a huge drug problem, and they're scared to take their kids outside to play. 6% of people here are jobless, and 16% live below the poverty line. But because of its location, competition for housing in LYNN has pushed the median home price to just over $320,000, and that makes it difficult to afford in an area where people only make about $56K for the whole house. Nearly a quarter of adults don't have a high school degree. I guess there's some positives living in LYNN. It's a diverse community. The food's great. The city's working to try to fix up the downtown area. Plus, George Clooney was in town recently filming a movie, so it can't be that bad, unless they were filming a ghetto movie. At number 4, we travel to a coastal city located in the southern part of the state, Fall River. Back in the 19th century, Fall River was where they made all the textiles. I mean, it was the leading textile manufacturer in the whole country. But those days have come and gone. And now, 20% of the residents lives below the poverty line, 8% of people don't have a job, and the homeless population here continues to grow. And at the same time, the schools are underperforming. 25% of people here don't have a high school degree, and all of that creates additional challenges. Then there's the crime. You have a 1 in 115 chance of being the victim of a violent crime if you lived in Fall River for a year. That's way above the national average. Seems fitting though, since Fall River is home to the infamous Lizzie Borden murder case. On the bright side, the city has a lot of immigrants from Portugal, so there's a bunch of good soccer players here, and there's kind of a nice waterfront and a cool bike path, and they have the world's largest collection of World War II naval vessels. The city's official motto is, "We'll try." I think residents are like, please try harder. Now we're going to go about 15 miles southeast to get to number 3 on our list, New Bedford. This was the setting for the famous novel Moby Dick. Fishing and manufacturing continue to be 2 of the largest businesses in the area, but they're not booming anymore. New Bedford has the state's 3rd highest unemployment rate, and the people here earn the 6th lowest salaries in the whole state. Sure, that's terrible, but the real reason to avoid planting roots in New Bedford is the crime. It's the 4th worst city in the state for crime, and it has a long reputation for violent crime. In fact, New Bedford still has 35 unsolved homicides since the turn of the century. A lot of these unsolved murders stem from the ongoing feuds between gangs in the south and gangs in the west sides of the city. If you live in New Bedford, you have a 1 in 151 chance of being the victim of a violent crime and a 1 in 40 chance that somebody's going to steal something from you. That is just terrible. People who grew up in New Bedford say it's a shell of what it once was. They say downtown used to be booming, and it was once a great place to live. Now it's a slum with heroin and cocaine flooding the streets. There's violence and crime everywhere, and it seems like just about every other day, a house is set on fire. It's not getting any better here now. I mean, just look back in March. The largest seizure of fentanyl in New Bedford's history happened. Police raided a home and found 7 kilos of the drug, which is worth $400 grand. Some residents joke that there's no drug problem in New Bedford. There's plenty to go around for everyone. At number 2 on our list, Springfield. Seems like every state has a Springfield, but this was the original Springfield. The town was settled in 1636, and this is where basketball was invented. The long and rich history doesn't mean much, though, when your economy's struggling. Nearly 27% of your residents are living in poverty, and about 9% don't have a job. During the 80s and 90s, Springfield developed a national reputation for crime and political corruption, and some of that still holds true. If you live in Springfield for a year, you have about a 1 in 111 chance of being the victim of a violent crime, and that is way higher than the national rate. It's not just a violent crime, the property crime levels in Springfield are the highest in the whole state. And if that wasn't enough, Springfield has some of the worst drivers. Stats show drivers here get into crashes at a higher rate than just about any other American city. And people complain that everybody here is rude too, so I guess the whole masshole nickname definitely would fit in here in Springfield. And the worst place to live in Massachusetts is Brockton. It's about a half hour south of Boston. It's terrible here. I mean, there are some serious problems in Brockton. There's a sluggish economy, 8% of people don't have a job, the schools here are beyond questionable, and the cost of living is actually high. Like, nobody has any money, and it's really expensive to live here. So what do you think is going to happen? If you drive around Brockton, you're going to see beautiful Victorian architecture, kind of surrounded by bullet casings and used needles and graffiti. The streets are full of crime, they're full of drugs, and they're full of gangs. Crime is terrible here. And if that wasn't enough, people living here say the streets have so many potholes it feels like you're riding a ride at Disneyland. Brockton is run down, dangerous, and just plain miserable. There's no other way around it. So there you have it, the worst places to live in Massachusetts. If you're looking for a place to live with the worst economic conditions, higher than average crime rate, and where there's not a lot to do, and where everyone's doing drugs and where it looks like crap, this list should be helpful. But if you're looking for some of the best places to live in the Bay State, it's going to be places like Melrose and Newton and Newburyport and Beverly and Medford, Cambridge, Peabody, those kind of places. Those would all be wicked good places to live. If you live in one of those cities, be glad you have it better than the ones we just talked about, because they are in need of some big-time intervention, people. Somebody do something about that. It's 6 o'clock on Monday, and I need to get down to the bar. There's a pub on every corner here, so I don't have to walk very far. On my way, I'll smoke some stuff and grab me a nice donkeys to go. All my Irish friends are drunk, maybe that's 'cause they're all massholes. It's just the state of Massachusetts. It's the Red Sox this year. Tom Brady's missed here. I'm wicked pissed here. It's just the state of Massachusetts. Hey guys, so if anything I just talked about upset you or made you sad or mad, well then do something about it. Call your local leaders and demand change. Chip in and help those in need. Make your community better, because communities don't get better without hard work and determination. America's a great place. It just needs some more love and pride.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.